Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to tackle a question that I bet you've thought about at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Is Christianity just another religion, or is it something more?
That's a good one.
We're diving deep into chapter 6 of a book, and it looks at how Christianity interacts with different cultures around the world.
Oh, wow.
Get ready
That's going to be good.
for some serious aha moments.
I'm excited.
So what's so fascinating about this chapter?
Well, the author, challenges us to think beyond the typical Sunday school definitions.
Right.
It's not just like a history lesson or a theology lecture.
Right.
He digs into the essence of what it means to be a Christian.
Yeah, and right away he asks this really interesting question. Is Christianity like a prepackaged box or more like an arrow?
Exactly. And he argues that religion is often treated like that rigid container, trying to fit into different cultures with like minimal changes.
Yeah.
But he suggests that true Christianity is more dynamic, like an arrow piercing through those cultural differences to connect with the individual's heart.
So before we go any further, we
Yeah.
really need to break down this word religion because it seems like there's so much baggage.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The author actually presents a few different definitions of religion to help us understand how complex it is.
Okay.
The first one he offers is that religion is basically like the set of assumptions that a group of people live by.
Okay.
And this could mean that even secular humanism, which is all about human reason and ethics over religious beliefs,
Right. Yeah.
could be considered a dominant religion in the West.
Well, that's interesting. So basically, even if we don't identify with a specific religion,
Mm.
we all have these frameworks of beliefs and values
That's right,
that we
yeah.
operate from.
And this helps explain why Westerners, who often come from, that secular humanistic perspective,
Right.
sometimes clash with other cultures, especially when sharing their faith.
Oh, yeah.
That's like trying to fit a square peg into a
Shells.
round
Oh,
bowl.
it's like we're coming in with a totally different operating system, not just a different app.
But he had another definition of religion too, right?
He did. The second one is that more common understanding of religion
Right.
as a system of supernatural beliefs and practices.
Yeah.
Think rituals, sacred texts, doctrines about the divine.
Right.
With this definition, Christianity is in direct competition with other faiths,
Right.
aiming to replace their beliefs and forms.
So that sounds more like the my religion is the only right one approach,
Yeah.
the old school,
Right.
like we're right and you're wrong type of thing.
Exactly. But then he throws a curveball and introduces his preferred definition, which is actually the foundation for his whole argument
Okay.
about what he calls contextualization.
Okay.
He suggests that true religion is all about the relationship with God, not rigid adherence to cultural forms.
Okay. I'm intrigued. How does that play out like in the real world? Because most of us experience our faith within a certain culture, right? We have our traditions, our hymns, our way of doing things.
That's a great question, and he uses a fascinating example from early Christianity to illustrate this point.
Right.
The first Christians were all Jewish.
Right.
So you might think Gentile converts had to become Jewish.
Right. To follow Jesus.
Right, exactly, if we're thinking about that box mentality.
Yeah, like you have to fit in this box.
But he points out how the Holy Spirit worked through Gentile cultures without forcing them to adopt all of the Jewish customs.
Right.
So it shows that God cares more about the heart than outward appearances or, cultural conformity.
So is he saying that Christianity isn't a religion? That's a pretty radical idea.
Well, that's where his core argument comes in.
Okay.
He proposes that Christianity was meant to be a faith, a deep personal commitment to Christ, rather than just a set of rules.
Right.
He's not advocating for abandoning all structure,
Right.
but he suggests that our faith can flow through different cultural forms, adapting to express its core truths in ways that resonate with the people it reaches.
Yeah.
To illustrate this, he makes a distinction between biblical Christianity with a capital C and culture Christianity with a lowercase c.
So what's the difference?
Biblical Christianity focuses on the essential meaning of the faith, those core truths that go beyond cultural boundaries.
Right.
It's about the heart of the message.
Got it.
Culture Christianity is more about the inherited forms and traditions that have developed within specific cultures.
Okay.
Think of it like this. You can have the same song
Okay.
played in different genres,
Right.
but the melody, the heart of the songs
Right.
is the same.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does this mean for our everyday experience of faith?
Yeah.
How do we know if we're practicing, biblical Christianity versus culture Christianity?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The author uses baptism and communion as examples.
Okay.
Two central practices in many Christian traditions.
Right.
We usually perform them using forms from first century Jewish culture.
Right.
But true contextualization, he says, might involve using forms familiar to other cultures while still keeping the core meaning. For example, imagine a culture where water is scarce.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of full immersion baptism, maybe they use a few drops of water
Right.
to symbolize cleansing and new life.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how much of our faith experience is shaped by cultural forms that we haven't even thought about.
It's like we're on autopilot following traditions without questioning where they came from or what they really mean.
Yeah.
The author is challenging us to be more intentional, to dig deeper and understand the meaning behind those forms.
So to really drive home this difference between religion and faith,
Yeah.
he gives us 10 contrasts.
He does, and they're so insightful.
Okay, so hit me with the first one.
The first one is structure versus person.
Okay.
Religion, he says, tends to focus on rules and regulations, outward conformity.
Okay.
Faith is about a personal relationship with God.
Okay.
It's about the heart, not just the actions.
But even faith needs some structure.
Right.
We need ways to connect with God and with each other.
Absolutely. He's not saying to get rid of all structure. He's just emphasizing that we need to know the difference between the core of our faith
All right.
and the cultural expressions of that faith.
Okay, so it's about finding that balance
Yes.
between holding on to the truth and allowing for some flexibility in how those truths are lived out.
Exactly.
Okay, so what's the next contrast?
All right, so the next contrast is performance versus obedience.
Okay.
He wants us to ask ourselves, are our rituals just going through the motions, a performance for others or even for ourselves? Or are they acts of true obedience coming from a deep love for God?
Okay.
It's easy to get caught up in routines and traditions without really connecting to the heart of our faith.
Yeah, that's deep. It makes
Huh.
you really examine your heart, your motivations for why you do what you do.
For sure.
Okay, so we've got relationship over rules,
Yeah.
genuine obedience over empty rituals.
Yeah.
What's next?
The next one is adaptation versus contextualization.
Okay.
And this is probably the most important one to understand his whole argument. He says that adaptation just tweaks the surface of religious practices to make them more appealing to a new culture,
Okay.
while contextualization goes deep into the meaning to find forms that really express the faith within that new context.
So it's not just changing the packaging, it's about understanding what's inside and finding a new way to present it.
Exactly. He uses some really vivid images
Okay.
to explain this.
I like that.
Have you ever tried to transplant a big tree?
Oh, yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Even if you get it in the new soil,
Yeah.
it's still rooted in its old environment.
Right. Sometimes it doesn't even survive.
Right, exactly. He compares that to adapting religion to a new culture.
Okay.
You can try to make it fit,
Yeah.
but it's still basically rooted in that original context.
Well, what about the analogy with bread and yeast?
Oh, yeah. He compares contextualization to planting a seed.
Okay.
A seed takes root and grows naturally in a new environment.
Doesn't need to be forced.
It takes what it needs from its surroundings. And for religion, he compares that to a loaf of bread,
Okay. A finished product.
a finished product. Yeah.
But faith is more like the yeast.
Yes. It works invisibly transforming the culture from within.
Okay. I see what he's saying. Religion can feel static and imposed,
Yeah.
but faith, when it's contextualized properly,
Yeah,
can bring real change from the inside out.
exactly.
Those images are helpful because they take these abstract ideas
Right.
and make them easier to understand.
Visuals are powerful.
Yeah. And we've only covered 3 of his 10 contrasts.
I know.
There's still so much more to unpack.
There is.
Okay, so what are some of the other contrasts that he uses
Right.
to highlight the difference between, experiencing Christianity as a religion versus a faith?
Well, he contrasts borrowing, accepting, and imitating with creating and growing.
Okay.
The author's point is that religion often involves adopting the specific forms of the source culture.
Okay.
Take Islam, for example.
Okay.
It requires particular prayer forms of pilgrimage to Mecca and Arabic Quran, and even certain clothing styles.
So it's kind of like a package deal,
Yeah.
take it or leave it.
Exactly. But true Christianity, he argues, doesn't mandate any specific cultural forms.
Okay.
That's how it was able to be embraced by the West,
Right.
even though it originated in the Middle East.
Right. So does that mean that we can just like make up our own rituals and practices?
Not exactly.
Right.
He's not saying anything goes.
Okay.
He emphasizes that the focus should be on conveying biblical meanings
Okay.
through forms that resonate with the receiving culture.
Okay.
So it's about understanding the essence of the message and finding authentic ways to express it
What?
in a new context.
It's like translating a book.
Yeah?
You don't just swap out the words, you try to capture the spirit,
Exactly.
the nuances of the original language.
Precisely. And then he contrasts the one-size-fits-all approach of religion
Okay.
with the cultural varieties of expression possible in a faith.
Okay.
Religion often wants uniformity, the
Nah.
same forms everywhere.
Everyone do it the same way.
But he argues that true Christianity should be as diverse
Right.
as the cultures it inhabits.
I like that. That's a beautiful image.
Yeah.
Christianity just flourishing
Yeah.
in 1,000 different forms,
Yeah.
each reflecting the beauty of its cultural context.
It's a far cry from the cookie-cutter Christianity we often see.
Totally.
Right.
So to illustrate this point, he brings back those powerful analogies.
Right.
The tree versus the seed.
He contrasts a tree that needs to be transplanted
Right.
with a seed that takes root and grows
Right.
in new soil.
Okay.
Religion, he says, is often treated like that tree,
Right.
uprooted and forced to adapt to a foreign environment.
Yeah, it's like those invasive species.
Right.
Sometimes transplanting something can actually hurt the ecosystem,
Exactly.
but a seed, well, it can bring new life and beauty to
Yeah.
the landscape.
And remember the bread and yeast analogy.
Oh, yeah.
Religion is like that pre-made loaf,
Okay.
a finished product.
But faith is like the yeast.
Yeah, it works in visibly transforming the culture from within.
Okay, I'm seeing a pattern here.
Right.
He's really emphasizing this idea of organic growth,
Yes.
allowing Christianity to find its own unique expression
Exactly.
to each culture.
That's the key.
Okay, so what's next on his list of contrasts?
Okay, so he contrasts sameness
Okay,
with variety.
okay,
This kind of builds on the previous contrast
okay.
with sameness. He's talking about how some religions insist on uniformity
Right.
in their practices and beliefs, no matter the cultural context.
Like everyone has to do it the same way?
Exactly. And he points out that this can actually hurt the spread of the faith because it comes across as rigid
Right.
insensitive to the differences between cultures.
It's like trying to force everyone to wear the same size shoe.
Right.
It's not going to work.
Not at all.
But with variety, he highlights how true faith can embrace all the different ways humans express themselves. Okay,
He argues that Christianity in its purest form doesn't require everyone to fit into a specific cultural mold.
right.
Instead, it allows for a beautiful tapestry of expressions, each reflecting the unique beauty and values of the culture,
I like that.
where it takes root.
That's a really nice way to put it.
Yeah.
It's like a garden with all kinds of flowers,
Yes.
all contributing to the beauty of the whole landscape.
His next contrast focuses on the tension between form and meaning.
Okay,
He points out that religions often put a lot of emphasis on the outward forms and rituals,
right.
but sometimes they lose sight of the deeper meaning.
Yeah, it's like going through the motions.
Yes,
Without understanding what it's all about.
exactly. He warns against reducing faith to just a list of rituals and practices.
Okay,
Instead, he wants us to dig deeper,
right.
to find the rich meaning behind the forms.
Okay,
Think about communion, for example.
okay.
The specific elements and procedures might be different
Right.
across different denominations, but the core meaning, remembering Christ's sacrifice and experiencing fellowship with him and each other,
Right.
that stays the same.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
It shows that the form can change.
Yeah.
As long as the essential meaning is preserved.
Right.
It's like using different spices to flavor a dish.
Yeah.
The specific combination might change, but the underlying flavor profile stays consistent.
Then he contrasts explicitness with implicitness.
Okay.
This one is a little more nuanced, but he's basically talking about how some religions rely a lot on explicit doctrines and rules,
Okay.
while others leave more room for individual interpretation and experience.
So it's kind of like the difference between a step-by-step instruction manual
Yeah.
versus, a more open-ended set of guidelines.
Exactly. He points out that while Christianity does have some clear core doctrines,
Right.
it also has this element of mystery and wonder
Right.
that can't be fully explained in words.
Right.
And he argues that this implicit dimension allows for personal growth and discovery because people are encouraged to wrestle with questions and
Okay.
search for deeper understanding.
That makes sense. It's like the difference between reading about a beautiful place
Yeah,
and actually going there and experiencing it yourself.
exactly.
There's a depth and a richness that you can only get
Right.
through that personal encounter.
His next contrast focuses on the tension between worldliness and spirituality.
Okay.
This one can be tricky
Okay.
because it's not about rejecting everything in the world.
Yeah.
He's actually advocating for a balanced approach.
So it's about engaging with the world,
Yes,
but in a way that honors our faith.
exactly. He argues that some religions try to separate the sacred and the secular,
Mhm.
viewing the world as inherently evil.
Okay.
But he suggests that true Christianity recognizes that God created the world
Right.
and that it's good, even though it's been messed up by sin.
So we're called to be in the world, but not of the world.
Exactly. He encourages us to see our faith as a lens through which we view the world, engaging with culture and society in ways that reflect our values and beliefs.
So it's not about building walls to keep ourselves separate.
Right.
It's about building bridges to connect with the
Yeah.
world in meaningful ways.
Exactly. His final contrast is institution versus fellowship.
Okay.
Religion, he argues, tends to become institutionalized,
Yeah.
focused on rules and self-preservation.
Okay.
And this can actually stifle the genuine fellowship that Christianity is supposed to be about.
We see that all the time.
We do.
Organizations, even churches,
Yeah.
can get so caught up in their own structures
Right.
that they forget about the people they're supposed to be serving.
Exactly. It's a cautionary tale for all of us involved in organized religion.
Yeah.
He points out that the real essence of Christianity is love.
Right.
Love for God and love for each other.
That's it.
That's the foundation of true fellowship.
Yeah. That's why Jesus said the greatest commandments are to love God and love our neighbor.
Yes.
It's all about relationships, not just following rules.
Exactly. Now, to go even deeper into how Christianity interacts with culture,
Okay.
he introduces this theory called recombination theory.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of it?
Can't say that I have.
Okay, well, it sounds technical.
Is this where we break out the lab coats and test tubes?
No,
Hey.
but it's a pretty simple concept.
Yep.
It suggests that when we encounter a new custom,
Okay.
we can break it down into its form and its function.
Okay, give me an example. How does this recombination theory work in real life?
Okay, so let's say you're a missionary
Okay.
working in a culture where ancestor veneration is really important.
Okay.
So ancestor veneration is like honoring and respecting your dead ancestors,
Yeah.
often with rituals, offerings, even seeking their guidance.
Okay.
The form might involve setting up a shrine in your home
Okay.
with pictures and offerings for the ancestors.
Okay, so I'm with you so far. How does recombination theory fit in?
Well, instead of just dismissing ancestor veneration as pagan or unchristian,
Yep.
you could use recombination theory to analyze it.
The form is the shrine and the offerings.
Right.
But the function, the underlying meaning, is showing respect for those who came before you,
Okay.
honoring family lineage,
Right.
seeking wisdom from those who have passed on.
Okay.
Now, Christianity values honoring those who came before us too,
Right.
especially those who shaped our faith.
Right.
We also believe in seeking wisdom from sources beyond ourselves,
Okay.
including the wisdom of the saints and the cloud of witnesses
Right.
who have gone before us.
Okay, so you're saying we can find common ground by focusing on the shared function,
Yes.
even if the forms look different.
Exactly. Instead of telling people to abandon their traditions,
Right.
you can help them find ways to express those values
Okay.
in a way that fits with their new faith.
Right.
Maybe instead of a shrine, they create a prayer corner
Okay.
with pictures of loved ones and Christian symbols.
Okay.
Maybe instead of offerings, they dedicate prayers and good deeds in memory of their ancestors. That's a much more sensitive and respectful approach than just saying the whole thing is wrong.
Exactly.
Okay, so the author uses the example of Islam and Christianity
Yes.
to show how recombination theory could work on a larger scale.
Yes. Islam has its specific forms, the 5 pillars, the Quran, etc.,
Right.
and its core faith commitment submission to Allah. Christianity also has its forms, baptism, communion, etc.,
Right.
and its core faith commitment to Jesus Christ.
So are you saying we could just mix and match?
No.
Like take the forms of Islam
No.
and combine them with Christian beliefs?
That's where it gets tricky.
Okay.
The author points out that true contextualization
Okay.
would involve expressing the Christian faith
Right.
through forms that resonate with Muslim culture.
Right. Okay. But wouldn't that be offensive to Muslims?
It could be.
Like we're trying to take their traditions.
He acknowledges the sensitivity of this approach
Okay.
and emphasizes the need for respect and understanding.
Yeah.
He also points out that the reverse, trying to fit Islam into Christian forms, is basically impossible
Right.
because Islam sticks very closely to its original cultural forms.
Okay. So he's not suggesting that we create some new hybrid religion.
No.
but rather find ways to express the Christian faith. That
Yes.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Within a Muslim context.
Exactly. It's about bridging the gap between cultures,
Okay.
not erasing the differences.
Okay, and this leads to another important point he makes.
Yes.
The tendency for Christianity to be seen as just another religion,
Yeah.
especially in cultures where it's been introduced from the outside.
Right. It can feel like it's being imposed on people
Yeah.
rather than coming from within.
Yeah, it goes back to that box analogy.
Exactly.
Missionaries, often with the best intentions,
Right.
have spread a westernized, culturally packaged version of Christianity.
Yes.
And this has led to conversions where people embraced Western culture along with their faith.
It's like Christianity became the same thing as Western civilization.
Right, exactly.
And this raises a question for you, listener.
Okay.
Has your view of Christianity been shaped by this cultural packaging?
Okay.
Or are you seeing the core faith in its purest form?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how much of what we call Christian
Yeah.
is actually just cultural stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, so this leads us to the author's final point,
Yeah.
which I find really insightful.
Okay.
He talks about the idea of a Christian worldview.
Okay.
A lot of Christians, especially in the West, use this term to describe a set of beliefs.
Right? That set them apart from the secular world.
It's like a checklist
Yeah.
of right beliefs versus wrong beliefs.
Right. But the author argues that this narrow view of a Christian worldview
Okay.
misses the bigger picture.
Okay.
He points out that a real worldview includes so much more than just doctrinal positions.
Right.
It's about a culture's understanding of time-space relationships, power,
Yeah.
and so much more.
Okay, so it's not just about having the right answers
Right.
on a theology test. It's about how we see the world and our place in it.
Exactly. And this is where contextualization is so important.
Yep.
The author argues that true contextualization allows most of a person's worldview to stay the same,
Okay.
only changing the parts related to the Christian faith.
Okay, so it's not about erasing everything and starting over.
Right.
It's about taking the core of Christianity
Yes.
and fitting it into the existing cultural framework.
Exactly. That's much more nuanced and respectful.
Right.
And it opens up so many possibilities for a diverse and vibrant expression
Right.
of the Christian faith around the world.
Right.
It's not about conformity, but about finding harmony
Right.
between the unchanging truth of the gospel
Okay.
and all the different ways human cultures are expressed.
Okay, wow, this is a lot to take in.
It is.
We've covered so much from those different definitions of religion
Yeah.
to those thought-provoking contrasts.
Yes.
And now this fascinating recombination theory.
It's a lot.
I'm starting to see Christianity in a whole new light.
It's a real paradigm shift.
It is.
It challenges us to go beyond our assumptions
Yeah.
and embrace the dynamic and adaptable nature
Right.
of true faith.
Wow, this has been an incredible deep dive.
Yeah.
Feels like we've only just scratched the surface
I know, right?
of this whole religion versus faith thing.
It's such a rich topic
Yeah.
with huge implications for
Yeah.
how we understand Christianity and how we interact with other cultures.
Right.
The author is brilliant
Yeah.
at making us rethink our assumptions
Yeah.
and pushing us to really think about what
Yeah.
it means to follow Christ
Right.
in a world with so many different cultures and beliefs.
Yeah, he threw out some real
He
curveballs.
did.
Especially that idea of Christianity not being a religion at all.
Yeah.
But I think I'm starting to get it.
Yeah.
It's about moving beyond those rigid forms.
Yeah.
And really embracing the heart of the faith, that personal commitment to Jesus.
Exactly. And recognizing that that commitment can be expressed in so many ways,
Yeah.
shaped by the beauty and diversity of all these cultures.
Right. It's not about forcing everyone into the same mold,
No, not at all.
but letting those seeds of faith take root
Yes.
and grow in new and unexpected ways.
Beautiful.
So for our listeners who might be feeling a little overwhelmed by all this information, what are the key takeaways?
Yeah.
What should they be thinking about as they go out their day?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that distinction between Christianity as a faith,
Yeah.
a personal relationship with God,
Right.
versus Christianity as a religion, a set of cultural forms and practices.
Right. Okay.
It's a small but really important difference
Yeah.
that can completely change how we see our own faith
Yeah.
and how we interact with other cultures.
And along with that is the importance of contextualization,
Yes.
finding ways to express those core truths
Right.
in a way that resonates with different cultures.
Exactly. It's about building bridges, not walls.
Okay.
Recognizing that the gospel message has universal appeal, but also respecting the uniqueness and complexity of each culture.
Right.
It's about moving beyond just adapting on the surface
Yeah.
to a deeper, more genuine engagement
Okay.
with the world around us.
So instead of trying to fit people into our box of beliefs,
Right.
we need to try to understand their worldview, their
Yes.
value, their cultural expressions,
Yes.
and find ways to connect those with the truth of Christianity.
Exactly. It's like that recombination theory we were talking about,
Right.
finding those shared threads of meaning and weaving them together to create something new and beautiful.
So recognizing that God can work through all these different cultural forms and expressions,
Yes.
and not just our Western way of understanding
Yeah,
Christianity.
right.
So what would you say to someone listening who's thinking, okay, this is all interesting, but how do I actually put this into practice in my own life?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think the first step is to have humility
Okay.
and curiosity.
Right.
Be willing to learn from others.
Yeah.
Listen to their stories and see the world through their eyes.
Okay.
Don't assume that your way is the only way or the best way.
That's so important.
It is.
It's about letting go of our biases.
Yes.
And realizing that God's kingdom is much bigger and more diverse than we can even imagine.
Exactly. The second step is to look for opportunities
Okay.
to interact with people from different cultures and backgrounds.
Okay.
You could travel to new places,
Right.
volunteer with refugee organizations,
Yeah.
or just start conversations with people you meet in your everyday life.
Yeah, it's about stepping outside of our comfort zones
Right.
and embracing all the richness and diversity
Yes.
that God has created.
Or finally, be open to the idea that your own faith might change
Okay.
through these experiences.
Okay.
Be willing to let go of some of those cultural things
Yeah.
that might be holding you back from connecting with others on a deeper level.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
How about you, listener?
Yeah.
Now that you've heard all this, how might it change your approach to sharing your faith?
Yeah.
Or even just understanding other cultures?
It's a good question.
Maybe you'll be more willing to ask questions,
Yeah.
to listen to different perspectives,
Yeah.
or to see the beauty and expressions of faith that are different from your own.
That's great.
Or maybe you'll start to look at your own beliefs and practices and ask yourself, is this really biblical Christianity
Right.
or just culture Christianity?
Those are great questions
Yeah.
to reflect on.
This is just the beginning of the journey.
It is.
There's always more to learn,
Always.
more to discover, and more to experience.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep diving deep, friends.